Newsfirst, Newsline.
Voting is an expression of commitment to ourselves, to one another, and to our country. However, here in Sri Lanka, that is no longer possible for Sri Lankans because there are certain elements, be it within government or without, that do not want to see Sri Lankans voting, that do not want to see Sri Lankans exercising their democracy. Why do I say this? Because we are at the cusp of a local government election that may or may not take place. The last bit of that phrase is very disturbing. To discuss these matters and more, we have with us the representative from the Center for Monitoring Election Violence, attorney at law, Dissanayake. A very good evening, Mr. Dissanayake, and welcome to the show.
Good evening.
So as an election monitor, of course, you would have been through many elections. You would have seen through the process of elections, how elections in Sri Lanka developed. I know that these are unprecedented times with the economic crisis in Sri Lanka, but this local government election, how bad is it?
Yeah, so we knew that this local government election was to held in 2022. So it was postponed by 1 year by the minister. So therefore, now we were expecting to have this election at least at the end of the year 2022 or beginning of the 2023. So now the time has come. So even before ending the official term of the all local government councils, the election need to be held. So now it is going to be finished by the 20th March 2023. So before that, we need to have the local government election. So that's why we were expecting to hold this local government election in this year, at the beginning of this year. But unfortunately, with the economic situation of the country, so highlighting the economic situation of the country, government is trying to postpone the election.
But Mr. Dissanayake, now I'm pretty sure you would have done your due diligence before you came on this show, and you would have obviously done your due diligence in monitoring this election situation in the country. Now the government keeps on citing various reasons. Initially there was the reason of the Campaign Financing Act coming into play, and then that the Elections Commission needs time to formulate regulations, so on and so forth. Then there was the issue of the Delimitations Committee. The President made a statement saying, look here, 8,000 representatives are too much for local government bodies, even though it was during his tenure as Prime Minister and during the tenure of the current Prime Minister as the chairman of the Committee on Delimitation that the number was increased from 4,000 to 8,000. That issue was brought up. That issue died down. Now they are saying we have no money. Is this a valid argument? Have you done any assessment regarding this claim? Like, do we really don't have 10 billion rupees to spare for an election that ensures our democracy?
Yes, so according to the constitution of the Sri Lanka, franchise is a part of sovereignty of the people. So can we postpone people's sovereignty of the franchise or the sovereignty because we don't have money? So the other thing is, can we say that we in the constitution we say that we are a democratic country? So being a democratic country, can we say that because we don't have money, so we don't need to be democratic furthermore? So that's a big issue with the thinking of the rulers of this country. So definitely they are bound to give the right of the people to exercise their franchise. So therefore we can't say that because we don't have money we can't conduct election. It's not a fair statement.
So Mr. Dissanayake, during your time as an election monitor, of course, while working with the elections processes taking place in Sri Lanka, you might also have made reference to international processes, closely monitored a few of them. Has there ever been a country in the history of the world that has said, look here, we are not having elections because we don't have money? Has there ever been a situation like that?
There have been situations when the authoritarian leaders come into the power, they can cancel the election, they can postpone the election. But if it is a democratic country, any democratic leader has postponed the election or cancelled the elections. So they should give the right of people to exercise in elections.
So Mr. Dissanayake, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're saying that if this election is not held, not on the 9th of May, because that's a date that has been given, the final date really for the election to be held is the 19th of March.
Yeah.
So if Sri Lanka does not hold the local government election on or before the 19th of March, there is no difference between Sri Lanka and a dictatorship.
Definitely. So we are disturbing the democratic process of the country. So the local government bodies are the primary level of primary level of the politics. So the people can engage in, people can participate in politics. So if we are going to disturb that process, definitely we are blocking the democratic ruling.
So, Mr. Dissanayake, now as an election monitor here in Sri Lanka, what do you plan on doing? Do you allow this to... Now, you said that this is wrong by the Constitution. It is wrong morally to deny people their right to vote. The fact that Sri Lanka does not have money, or the allegation or the presumption that Sri Lanka does not have money to hold an election is not enough to limit the sovereignty of the people. If this decision is so wrong, why aren't we seeing people, well, up in arms, at least on the street, about this?
Yeah, so I think the people are thinking about democratic way to respond this. So even the election observers, so we are as election observers, even the political parties, they are now thinking about democratic way. So the democratic way is going to courts and requesting courts to give an order to conduct election. So that is, I think it is happening. I heard that one MP has filed already a case against the decision of the government, especially about the printer. So therefore, that's the first way we want to see before we go into the streets, so that we will have to think about the way we can resolve this issue in a democratic way.
Mr. Dissanayake, there might be some people who still think that, we really don't have money. Maybe the government is right on this matter. But you have vehemently rejected those claims that, we don't have 10 billion to hold an election. Would you mind if we just break down this entire process? How does the Elections Commission pay for these elections? Do they have to make all payments up front? Starting with, now let's take this issue of printing of the ballot papers. One of the reasons why Sri Lankans are getting so much of knowledge about how these internal processes in government work is because there is so much of ambiguity here, and the government continues to make various claims. It's important that people know how these processes work to really understand the logic and the reality behind these. So how does the printing of ballot papers really work? What's the process there?
Yeah, according to my awareness, being engaged in the electoral process in last 10-20 years. So after declaring election by the Election Commission, so they give the order to the government printer to print ballot papers. So when they give the order to print ballot papers, so normally the government printer requests a kind of advance to start his their process. So this time also they have requested, according to the information, they have requested about 200 million for starting the ballot printing process. But from the government, then they have come to agreement to give about 100 million as the initial payment. But as the government printer explained yesterday, so she has got only about 40 million. So another 60 million is lacking, so she's expecting at least that amount to start the printing process. So then we can see that this process, blocking of this process is happening from the side of the Treasury. So the Treasury has not given that money to the Election Commission or the government printer to start the process. So they are trying to block the process. So anyway, if they get in that advance amount so that they will start the printing process, then they will finish all the printing work related to the election. Because the Election Commission has no power to go to outsiders, they will have to do all the printing with the government printer.
So, Mr. Dissanayake, correct me if I'm wrong. Now, let's try to put this into perspective. So, you have on one side the Elections Commission, which is an independent body.
Yeah.
Then on the other side, you have the government printer, which is a state institution, an arm of the state, controlled by the state, appointed by the state. The government printer is appointed by the state. Then you also have the Treasury, again on the side of the state. So the Elections Commission is merely an intermediary who facilitates the holding of these elections independently, of course, so that it doesn't favor any party. So we have here on the government side, the government printer saying, look here, I haven't gotten the money. And we also have the Treasury saying, we will give you this money, but we can only give you this much now. We don't have money. So the blockage is only from the side of the state, is it not?
Yeah, that is definitely from the side of the state. So, because even the election commission, they should give the money at least the election commission to conduct the election, because we knew that when we prepare in the national budget also, we knew that the election is due to come in this year. So, therefore, they have allocated some money for the required money for the election. So, the not releasing that money for the election commission and the government printer is the responsibility is with the government now. So, the other thing is that the government has a responsibility to support the electoral process. So, the president has a constitutional duty to create an enabling environment to conduct the election. So, if he block this process, or if he give the permission to government officers, to instruction government officers to block this process, he is also violating the constitution.
So we saw certain decisions that were taken by government officials, certain letters issued by, I believe, Neil Hapuina, the Secretary of the Ministry of Public Administration, directing all returning officers not to accept bonds placed by candidates for the local government election. These decisions are still being challenged in court. The matter was set for to be taken up at the Supreme Court on a later date. With regard to these efforts of, hampering the election, what really is the progress on that front? Let's forget about the no money, no printing matter, but there were attempts in the past as well. There was also a circular issued, I believe, directing state officials to only issue money for essential matters, and these essential matters had been listed. And election is not among these essential matters, and that is one of the major deterrents for state sector officials to really cooperate with the Elections Commission and facilitate this election, because that circular states that if you do release funds that are not going to be used for any of these essential purposes, you will be liable to return or compensate the government personally. Is this circular legal? Can a government servant be held personally responsible like that?
That's the issue. So the source of the law of the country is constitution. So how can the circular can violate constitutional provisions?
Yes.
So that's the issue. So if someone try to violate the constitution using the circular, even the executive president, he has no power to issue a circular violating the constitution. So this is the finance ministry or the treasury. So how can treasury issue such kind of circular to violate constitutional provisions and the sovereignty of the people of the country? So that's a big issue. So I think it is people's right and people's duty to go to courts and challenge those circulars.
But Mr. Dissanayake, now in all reality, there might be people watching this program right now, but they're embroiled in this economic crisis and they really can't go to court as such. They have to retain a lawyer. That's not their field of expertise, and that's why Sri Lanka has got very eminent people like you, of course, election observers, those who are dedicated to protect the fundamental right to vote of both our viewers and all of us here in Sri Lanka. So what steps have you taken? What steps will you be taking? When I say you, I mean election observers, including the CMEV and other election observers in Sri Lanka.
Yeah, definitely. As election observers, we are bound to protect the democracy of the country. So we are appearing for the democracy and the democracy of the country, protect that. So therefore, now we are thinking about, we are looking for avenues to go to court and get the order from the court to give a direction, direction from the court for these officials to conduct the election, especially with regard to the treasury. So that we are expecting a guideline or direction from the courts to release money to conduct the election at the moment. So the other thing, the government printer. So we think that government printer also has a duty, because when we see about the history of the government printer, so she can do printing even without getting those allocated money, because she has enough paper there, ink there, and the payment for the labor can be done later. So she is asking about the payment for the labor, but that can be done later. So in every election, those payments are done later. Sometimes even after 2-3 months. So I saw in a news today that there are millions to get from government, other institutions, the printing department. So in that way, even she can do her duty for conducting the election. So therefore, we are thinking about getting order from the courts to instructing them to perform their duties.
Well, I believe several political parties and other non-state actors went to court recently seeking an order from the Supreme Court to direct the Elections Commission to hold the election. However, that petition was tossed out because the Elections Commission came before the Supreme Court and said, look here, we are taking all steps to hold the election. But now the election is being hampered by other state parties. Where do we go next? We'll bring you the details after this short commercial break. Don't go anywhere. You're watching Newsline Live.
Newsfirst, Newsline.
Newsfirst headlines. Main sponsor.
Durden's Hospital, dedicated to you.
An uninterrupted supply of power from today following electricity tariff hike, says Energy Minister. PUCSL Chairman's office sealed by police. PUCSL Chairman says tariff hike is illegal and will go to court against it alone. Supreme Court decides to consider the petition against Neil Bandara Hapuinna's circular on local government election. Government printer lacks funds and security as ballot printing process faces obstacles. If you don't have funds, turn to the businessman. Hirunika's proposal to the government. Teenagers who beat a father of one to death with motorcycle helmets in Valipenna sent to detention.
Newsfirst headlines. Main sponsor.
Durden's Hospital, dedicated to you. Experience the best in healthcare at Durden's Hospital. We continue to evolve into a purpose-built hospital built to deliver world-class care. Trust in us for all your healthcare needs. Durden's Hospital, dedicated to you.
Newsfirst, Newsline.
Welcome back. We're discussing the election. Will the election be held? Will the election be postponed? When will the election be held? These are all questions that we are trying to find answers to. Mr. Dissanayake, now we've been discussing about whether the government really doesn't have money to hold this election. Will the election be held? Will the election be postponed? I want to direct a question to you. You might have to put on maybe or take on the role of a soothsayer for this maybe, because, you know, judging by your experience in the field and what you see happening right now, what do you think is the most possible or probable outcome of all of these actions and inactions of the state and other factions that are supposed to hold the election? What do you think the outcome will be?
Supposed not to hold the election.
No, what would the outcome be? Now, we see the Elections Commission trying to hold the elections to a certain degree. Then we see other parties trying to stop this. There were efforts from passing acts to making delimitation committees to now the government printer coming and saying, look, we don't have money. The Treasury saying, yeah, we've allocated 10 billion, but, you know, this is all we can give you right now. Where will this lead to?
Yeah, definitely. So the government is unable to give the money for conducting the election, so there will be a greater dissatisfaction of the society about the government, and unfortunately the people will try to come onto the street and asking for election. So that will happen. So the people say that the people doesn't need election at the moment, so we don't see an interest of people participating in election. That's wrong. So even though people are not participating in election campaign and things at the moment, because of the economical and other social issues, they are expecting for election to participate. They want to vote in election. So therefore, if government try to postpone the election or cancel the election, there will be worse results of that.
Mr. Dissanayake, now speaking of elections and, you know, democratic processes in a country, it's always important to assess whether an elected government of the time is really a legitimate government. I don't know if it's fair for me to ask you this question, but do you think that the current sitting government in Sri Lanka is a legitimate government?
Yeah, that is something the difficult question to answer. But when we see that according to the constitution, so we know that the current government and the current president elected by the parliament from the members of the parliament. So therefore, that is the constitutional provision. But we know that this president and the government has no mandate of the people really. So the people are not happy with their ruling and their policies and everything. So therefore, when we consider from the people's perspective, this is not a legitimate government. But according to the constitution, we will have to consider it is as a legitimate.
So, Mr. Dissanayake, I'm just curious. Now, the things that are happening these days in Sri Lanka as far as the economic crisis is concerned, more than these days, just a few months back, I think a lot of people have forgotten how people were standing in fuel queues, in gas queues, how people were dying in their vehicles because of heart attacks and various other illnesses. Some people were just dehydrated after standing in the scorching hot sun. So these things that we're seeing in Sri Lanka right now have never before been seen in the country. These are all very novel experiences for Sri Lanka. So we cannot discount anything and say that, you know, although this happened in that country, it's not going to happen here. We're walking on a very thin line as far as the democracy in the country is concerned. If things continue, how far do you think we can fall? Now, we've fallen economically to, you know, the bottom of the hole. How far do you think we can fall democratically? Because when this economic crisis was coming about, people said, you know, this is what's going to happen to us. People are not going to have food to eat. Inflation is going to skyrocket if you keep on printing money. Those were economists. Now, as an election observer, if someone comes and asks you, what will be the future if we don't have elections, if this government continues to act like this, if this government continues to postpone elections until a favorable environment is created for them to emerge victorious at this election?
No, at the moment, we know with the current economic crisis, we are expecting support from the international partners, especially from the IMF and any other entities and the banks and all of them. We are expecting their support to come out from this economic crisis. So therefore, if the democracy is fallen, so all those entities will not come to support to the Sri Lanka. So if the law and order is not existing, then remain in the country, and the human right situation is worse in the country, in the democratic principles are not followed in the country. So in such a situation, people will not come to a support to such country. So therefore, if the government want to find solution for the current economic crisis, definitely they will have to empower the democratic process in the country. Without democratic process, even business community or any other people will not come and help the Sri Lanka economy.
Mr. Dissanayake, in a landmark verdict recently, the Supreme Court held that former President Maithripala Sirisena was liable for the inactions of the officials that he appointed that were under institutions, government departments that were under his purview as the Minister of Defense. Now, the Supreme Court used the Kaltona principle that was developed in the United Kingdom to hold the minister liable. In your view, I know you can't interpret the Constitution or interpret the law, but in your view, do you think a similar scenario would follow if the current finance minister, who is the president, does not allocate funds or release funds for this election? Can someone go to court and say, it's a fundamental right for me to vote, the president is the minister of finance, his officials have neglected releasing funds to hold this election, and therefore my fundamental rights were violated, the president is liable?
Yeah, definitely the voting right has been accepted as a fundamental right according to the Constitution. So if anyone is violating that right, so that person should be liable. We know that the president, after the 19th Amendment, we can file a fundamental right case against even the president. So therefore, if someone wants to go to court and file a fundamental right petition against the petition and request the court to declare that his right is violated by this decision, so then definitely the president will be liable for that.
Mr. Dissanayake, we're in the final few minutes of this show. My final few questions to you. Can the postponement of this election, I know now we've been discussing heavily about the postponement of the elections or not holding the elections before the 19th of March, which is the due date according to the Constitution and other election-related laws that are present here in Sri Lanka. Can the postponement of this election or not holding the election before the 19th of March be justified by any extent or stretch of the laws that are prevailing in Sri Lanka right now?
I don't see any possibility to justify that, the postponement of the election. So the weekend postponement of the election, so the Local Government Authority Election Act provides, if there is an emergency situation in the country, in such situations, so the local government election can be postponed. But at the moment, it is not an emergency situation.
So when you say emergency situation, this is the emergency that is, referred to or contemplated under the Public Securities Ordinance, a state of emergency, you mean, that has been declared by the President. And there is no state of emergency right now in Sri Lanka.
Yeah, no one is declared emergency situation in the country. So that economic issue, now we are recovering from that. No, so when we see the statistics, so we can see that it is recovery. So therefore, you can't interpret this situation as an emergency situation anyway. So therefore, in such a situation, you can't find any provision to postpone the election.
One final question, Mr. Dissanayake. Now, we see if a person is protesting on the street, best example being these two girls who were protesting close to Galle-Face, not even close to Galle-Face, it was more towards Galle-Face Hotel right next to the roundabout. They were protesting against the government spending 200 million rupees on a flamboyant Independence Day celebration. I mean, the 200 million could have been used to pay the government printer, but then those facts are aside. The money has already been spent. People who've attended the Independence Day celebrations have had their fun. But these two girls were asked to leave. They were not allowed to voice their opinions there. We see if a person protests on the street, they will be easily arrested under Section 120 of the Penal Code and thrown in jail or put before a magistrate saying that they're conspiring against the government. Do you think that state officials are now conspiring against the government by, hindering this election process or working to stop the election from taking place?
That's the thing. So when the people are come out to the roads and when they protest against the government policies, that can considered as the conspiracy against the government. But when the government officials are disturbing the process of the government, so the election is something the government are bound to do. So they are disturbing that process. So the disturbing that process we can consider, we can interpret as the conspiracy against the government also. So in the Constitution also, if any government official not supporting the decision of the Election Commission, it is being considered as a criminal offence. So this type of move of the government printer or any other officials can be considered as a conspiracy against the government.
Well, Mr. Dissanayake, you're the expert, you're the election observer, and it seems like you've got a lot of work on your hands. So, Mr. Dissanayake, I'm not going to keep you here any longer. Of course, also, the time allocated for our program has unfortunately come to an end. But thank you very much, Mr. Dissanayake, for coming on our show and explaining, of course, to our viewers the importance of an election and how the processes around it, the nitty-gritties around the election really work. And also, Mr. Dissanayake, good luck for your future work in ensuring that people in Sri Lanka can finally vote and make their voices heard. I believe a lot of people here in Sri Lanka are eagerly waiting to make or to cast their vote and to ensure that Sri Lanka has a better future. We've tried it multiple times before and we've got it wrong on more times than once, but well, let's hope that this time we can make it the charm. Thank you very much, Mr. Dissanayake, once again. Thank you very much to all our viewers out there also for tuning in. Until we meet again, take care and God bless.